The fluorescent lights of Nexus Innovations always hummed with a specific kind of energy, a blend of ambition and the quiet hum of servers. For 7 years, that hum had been the soundtrack to my professional life, a comforting rhythm that spoke of purpose and progress. I was Ilara, a senior project manager, and I poured my heart and soul into every project, every client, every late night. Nexus wasn't just a workplace. It was a significant part of my identity, a place where I felt valued, indispensable even. Or so I thought. My boss, Mr. Harrison, was a man of calculated charm. He had a way of making you feel like a crucial cog in his grand vision, even as he subtly shifted responsibilities or took credit for others' work. He was all smiles and backpats, but underneath I always sensed a current of self-preservation, a man who would throw anyone under the bus to save himself. Miss Davies, our HR manager, was his perfect counterpart, a woman carved from ice, whose empathy seemed to have been surgically removed. She was the embodiment of corporate policy, cold and unyielding. And then there was Derek, a fellow PM, whose ambition was less about achievement and more about undermining anyone who shone brighter than him. He was a constant, low-level irritant, always hovering, always watching, always ready to pounce on a perceived weakness. Our company had a notoriously strict expense policy. Every receipt, every meal, every mile driven was scrutinized. It was a tedious but necessary evil, ensuring accountability. I prided myself on my meticulous record-keeping. I knew the rules inside out, having trained countless new hires on the intricacies of expense reporting. It was a system I trusted, a system I believed in. One Tuesday, after a particularly fruitful client meeting that stretched through lunch, I submitted my expense report. It included a modest $45 receipt for 2 sandwiches and coffees, a standard business lunch. I attached the digital copy, double-checked the client's name, and clicked Submit. It was routine, unremarkable, a tiny blip in the vast sea of my daily tasks. I thought nothing more of it. 2 days later, the world tilted on its axis. An email, stark and formal, landed in my inbox. Meeting required. Immediate discussion regarding expense report. The sender was Miss Davies. My stomach clenched. This wasn't standard. I reread it, my heart beginning to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What could it be? I racked my brain, replaying every recent expense, every interaction. Nothing. A cold knot of dread began to form. I walked into Mr. Harrison's office, Miss Davies already seated opposite him, her expression a mask of professional indifference. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, heavy and suffocating. Mr. Harrison, usually effusive, merely gestured to the empty chair. His smile was gone, replaced by a grim set to his jaw. "Ilara, thank you for coming," he began, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. "We need to discuss your recent expense report." My mind raced. Of course, Mr. Harrison. Is there an issue? Miss Davies slid a printout across the polished desk. It was a blurry, slightly cropped image of my $45 receipt. "This receipt, Ilara," she stated, her voice flat, "is for a personal meal, not a client lunch." Confusion warred with indignation. "That's impossible," I said, my voice rising slightly. "That was lunch with Mr. Chen from Sterling Solutions. We discussed the Phase 2 rollout." Mr. Harrison leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. "We contacted Mr. Chen. He confirmed he did not have a business lunch with you on that date." My blood ran cold. This was a lie, a blatant, sickening lie. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a primal fight-or-flight response. That's simply not true. Mr. Chen and I spent nearly 2 hours discussing the project. We had lunch right there at the cafe downstairs from his office building. He specifically recommended their turkey pesto sandwich. Miss Davies merely raised an eyebrow. "Our records, and Mr. Chen's statement, contradict your account. Submitting a personal expense as a business one, Ilara, is a clear violation of company policy. It's expense fraud." "Expense fraud? The words hung in the air, grotesque and unbelievable. Me? Fraud? I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up, quickly stifled by the sheer terror of the situation. This is absurd. I have never, not once, submitted a fraudulent expense. You can check my entire history. Why would I risk my career, my reputation for $45? Mr. Harrison sighed, a performance of weary regret. It's not about the amount, Ilara. It's about the principle, the trust. We have zero tolerance for this. But you're wrong, I pleaded, my voice cracking. Please let me call Mr. Chen right now. He'll confirm it. This is a misunderstanding, a terrible mistake. Miss Davies shook her head. The decision has been made, Ilara. Effective immediately, your employment with Nexus Innovations is terminated. The words hit me like a physical blow. Terminated. Just like that. 7 years, countless hours, unwavering loyalty, all wiped away over a fabricated $45 receipt? My mind reeled. It couldn't be happening. This was a nightmare. I looked from Miss Davies's impassive face to Mr. Harrison's feigned sorrow, and a terrible realization dawned on me. They weren't mistaken. They were doing this deliberately. "You're firing me?" I whispered, the humiliation burning my cheeks. "For this? This fabricated accusation?" "We consider the matter closed," Miss Davies said, already pushing a severance agreement across the desk. "Sign this and you'll receive 2 weeks' pay. Otherwise, we'll consider it a termination for cause, which will impact your future employment prospects." My hands trembled as I stared at the document. My entire career was being threatened. My future, my ability to pay rent, my integrity, my name. I couldn't sign it, not without a fight. "I'm not signing anything," I said, pushing the paper back. "This is unjust. I will fight this." Mr. Harrison's veneer of regret vanished, replaced by a flash of annoyance. "Ilara, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." "Difficult for whom?" I shot back, my voice gaining strength. "For me, who's just been falsely accused and fired? Or for you, who's orchestrating this charade?" Miss Davies stood up, her voice chillingly calm. "Security will escort you out. Please gather your personal belongings and leave the premises immediately." The walk out of the office felt like a perp walk. Every eye seemed to be on me, every whisper a judgment. The security guard, a kind man I'd often exchanged pleasantries with, looked genuinely uncomfortable. The humiliation was absolute, a searing brand on my soul. As I stepped out into the harsh afternoon sun, the hum of Nexus Innovations faded behind me, replaced by a deafening silence. My world had imploded. The days that followed were a blur of anger, despair, and a gnawing sense of injustice. I replayed every second of that meeting, every word, every nuance. The coldness of Miss Davies, the calculated performance of Mr. Harrison, and the lie about Mr. Chen. That was the key. Why would they lie? Why go to such lengths for a measly $45? It didn't add up. This wasn't about a receipt. It was about something far more sinister. I called Mr. Chen discreetly, explaining I was following up on our project discussion and casually mentioning the lunch. He was surprised. "Lunch? Oh yes, of course, Ilara. Great conversation. You know, your company actually called me asking if we'd had a business lunch, and I confirmed we did. Why would they even ask that?" My blood ran cold again, but this time it was a cold, calculated fury. They hadn't just lied. They had actively tried to manipulate Mr. Chen, and when that failed, they'd fabricated his denial. The audacity, the sheer corruption. This wasn't a mistake. This was a targeted attack. Who stood to gain? Derek? His constant veiled criticisms, his thinly disguised envy. Had he played a part, or was he just a pawn? My mind kept returning to Mr. Harrison and Miss Davies. They were the architects of my downfall. But why? What was the real motive? I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by old expense reports, company policies, and my own meticulous notes. I remembered a company-wide email a few months prior about a new, more robust digital expense system being rolled out. Some managers, particularly those less tech-savvy, had struggled with the transition. Mr. Harrison, for all his charisma, was notoriously bad with new technology. Miss Davies, on the other hand, was a stickler for procedure. It was an odd pairing for a fraudulent scheme, unless one was covering for the other or both were involved in something larger. The one receipt detail kept bothering me. It was too small, too insignificant to warrant such a drastic response. Unless it was a distraction, a smokescreen. What if they needed to appear tough on fraud to deflect attention from their own fraudulent activities? What if I was just a convenient scapegoat? My investigative instincts, honed by years of project management, kicked in. I thought about the company's internal audit process, the pathways receipts took, the approval chains. I remembered a former colleague, Liam, who had worked in IT and had been laid off during a recent restructuring. Liam was always a straight shooter, and he had his own grievances with Nexus. He might have insights. I reached out to Liam. He was initially hesitant, wary of getting involved, but my story clearly resonated with his own bitterness towards the company. I explained everything: the false accusation, the fabricated lie about Mr. Chen, the abrupt termination. He listened patiently, then leaned forward. Alara, I can't give you access to internal systems, you know that. But I did hear things, rumors. Harrison and Davies were definitely struggling with the new expense system. And there were whispers about their own expense reports being flagged for anomalies. Nothing concrete, just whispers, but enough to make me think. Anomalies? I pressed. What kind of anomalies? Liam shrugged. Overspending, duplicate claims, questionable vendors, the usual, but they always seemed to get swept under the rug. Harrison was a golden boy, you know, high-level connections. No one wanted to cross him. That was it, the missing piece. Harrison's golden boy status, Miss Davies' procedural rigidity, they were a shield. They were using my minor, fabricated transgression to create a smokescreen, to show the board they were tough on fraud while their own, far larger schemes were unfolding beneath the surface. I started digging into public records. Nexus Innovations was a large company, publicly traded. Their financial statements, project announcements, and executive travel logs were all matters of public record, to varying degrees. I remembered Harrison's penchant for luxury, his frequent business trips that seemed more like lavish vacations. He often boasted about staying at five-star hotels, even for conferences held in more modest venues. I found a press release announcing a major industry conference in Miami that Harrison supposedly attended, claiming a week-long stay at the exclusive Ocean View Grand Resort. I cross-referenced it. The conference was in Miami, but it was held at the City Convention Center, and most attendees stayed at the more reasonably priced Bayside Suites. The Ocean View Grand was known for its exorbitant rates and celebrity clientele. Could he have genuinely stayed there and expensed it legitimately? Perhaps, but it felt like another thread to pull. Then another anonymous email, likely from Liam or another disgruntled employee, landed in my inbox. Check Project Chimera. Vendor, Global Solutions Group. Project Chimera was a massive, high-profile project that Harrison had spearheaded, and Global Solutions Group sounded suspiciously generic. I spent days researching Global Solutions Group. It was a shell company, incorporated in a state known for its lax disclosure laws, with a P.O. box as its address. Digging deeper, through public records and a bit of social engineering, I discovered the company's registered agent was a man named Arthur Harrison, Mr. Harrison's cousin. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. This wasn't just expense fraud. This was a sophisticated kickback scheme, using a shell company to siphon funds from Nexus Innovations through inflated invoices on major projects. My $45 receipt was a desperate, clumsy attempt to divert attention, to create a tough-on-fraud narrative right before their own house of cards came tumbling down. The sheer scale of the deception was breathtaking. Millions of dollars, not just hundreds. My small, legitimate expense was a mosquito bite compared to the financial hemorrhage Harrison and Davies were orchestrating, and I had been the convenient, disposable distraction. Armed with a growing mountain of evidence, my original receipt, Mr. Chen's confirmed statement, the details of the Ocean View Grand Resort, the corporate records of Global Solutions Group, and its clear link to Arthur Harrison, I knew I couldn't go back to Mr. Harrison or Miss Davies. That would be suicide. I needed to go higher. I compiled everything into a meticulously organized dossier, a testament to my project management skills. I didn't just have accusations, I had evidence, documented, cross-referenced, and undeniable. I then reached out directly to the chairman of the board of Nexus Innovations, a venerable old guard named Mr. Sterling. I requested an urgent, confidential meeting, stating I had critical information regarding financial irregularities and unethical conduct at the highest levels of the company. I made sure to mention my recent unjust termination, subtly hinting at its connection to the larger issue. Mr. Sterling's office initially tried to push me to HR, but I insisted, politely but firmly, that the matter was far too sensitive for standard channels and directly implicated HR leadership. My persistence paid off. A meeting was scheduled for the following week. Walking into the boardroom, the same room where I had once presented quarterly reports with pride, felt surreal. Mr. Sterling sat at the head of the table, flanked by two other board members and an external legal counsel. Their expressions ranged from skepticism to cautious curiosity. I took a deep breath, clutching my dossier, my hands steady despite the tremor in my chest. "Good morning," I began, my voice clear and unwavering. "My name is Alara, and I was a senior project manager at Nexus Innovations until 2 weeks ago, when I was unjustly terminated for alleged expense fraud. I am here today not to plead for my job back, but to expose a far more egregious fraud that has been systematically draining this company of millions of dollars, orchestrated by Mr. Harrison and Miss Davies." Their faces remained impassive, but I saw a flicker of alarm in Mr. Sterling's eyes. I laid out my case, piece by painstaking piece. I started with my $45 receipt, demonstrating how it was legitimate, how Mr. Chen confirmed it, and how Mr. Harrison and Miss Davies had lied, fabricating evidence and attempting to manipulate a client. I showed them the original receipt, the doctored one, and Mr. Chen's email confirming our lunch. Then I moved on to the real fraud. I presented the evidence of Mr. Harrison's lavish, expensed hotel stays that didn't align with actual conference locations. I laid out the trail of Global Solutions Group, the shell company, its connection to Arthur Harrison, and the inflated invoices that had siphoned funds from Project Chimera. I showed them the dates, the amounts, the public records, the corporate filings. The silence in the room was absolute, punctuated only by the rustle of papers as they examined the evidence. As I spoke, I watched their faces. The initial skepticism gave way to shock, then to outrage, and finally to a grim determination. The external counsel was taking furious notes. Mr. Sterling's jaw was clenched, his eyes narrowed in disbelief and fury. This wasn't just a betrayal of the company, it was a personal affront to his leadership. When I finished, the silence stretched, heavy with the weight of revelation. Mr. Sterling finally broke it. "Alara," he said, his voice low and tight with suppressed anger, "if what you've presented is true, this is an unimaginable breach of trust." "It is true, Mr. Sterling," I replied, looking him directly in the eye. "And I have no doubt that a full internal audit will confirm every single detail." The internal investigation began immediately. Harrison and Davies were suspended within hours. The corporate rumor mill went into overdrive. The following week, a terse internal memo announced their termination due to serious violations of company policy and ethical conduct. Derek, who I later learned had been instrumental in subtly altering the image of my receipt and feeding false information to Harrison, was also quietly let go. His petty jealousy had finally caught up with him. The company issued a public statement about unforeseen internal restructuring and commitment to ethical governance, a thinly veiled admission of the scandal. I received a formal apology from Mr. Sterling himself, expressing profound regret for my treatment and offering a substantial severance package, far more generous than the initial 2 weeks' pay. He even extended an offer to return to Nexus at a higher position and with a significant raise. I politely declined. While the vindication was sweet, the trust was irrevocably broken. Nexus, for all its former allure, had shown its true colors. I had fought for my integrity, and I had won. That was enough. Leaving that boardroom, the air felt lighter, the sky brighter. The weight of injustice had lifted. My name was cleared, not just to the board, but to myself. The pain of the false accusation, the humiliation, the fear, they hadn't broken me. Instead, they had forged me into something stronger, more resilient. I had learned that integrity is not just a word, it's a shield, a weapon, and a compass. And sometimes the smallest, most unassuming piece of evidence, like a $45 receipt, can dismantle an empire of lies. I went on to find a new role at a different company, one where transparency and ethical conduct were not just buzzwords, but deeply ingrained values. I carried the lessons from Nexus with me, a silent reminder to always trust my instincts, to meticulously document everything, and to never, ever let injustice stand. My career had been threatened, my reputation almost ruined, but in the end, my one receipt didn't just save me, it ended their careers and brought a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme crashing down.